Hey everybody, welcome back to PHP Fundamentals, and in this lesson we're just going to take a look at a lot of different functions that we can use when working with files. So let's dig in. I will be using CodeRunner for these examples because we'll be running a lot of code, and here we are within the sandbox that we've been working on in this course. Now I've already created this new folder, File Functions. And within here, I've added just some random files. So for example, I have this random.txt file, we have our index.php file, and then I have this images folder that contains some various PNG and JPEG files. So I'm going to begin by showing you the glob function, and this can be very handy. Watch what happens if I run files equals, and then I'm going to use the glob function. Now what we can see here with the code hinting is that it's going to expect a string that represents the pattern for what we are looking for. So for example, if I look for r star.txt and then I print r the files that were returned, if I run this, now you can see that we get this array that contains random.txt. If I create another file called another.txt, and let's create another one that starts with r, maybe really cool file.txt, just to have some files to work with. Now, once again, if I run that again, now this array has returned 2 files. So what we are doing here is we are specifying that we are hunting down, or think of it as grabbing a big glob. We're going to grab a glob of files that match this pattern. And the pattern is the file needs to begin with R, and then the star will represent any character, any number of any characters. So we're looking for any file that begins with an R and ends with .txt. Now what if we are looking for images? Well, we can do the same approach. I can look for star.jpg. Now we're going to get an empty array because by default glob is not recursive. And what I mean by that is it's simply going to look in the current folder or the folder that you specify. It's not going to recursively enter each folder and check that one for files that end in .jpg. So we could write a function that would do that recursively, and you can refer to php.net/glob, and I guarantee there will be some options there within the comments. But instead, let's keep it simple, and I'm going to first look within the images folder and then try to find a file that starts with any number of characters but ends with .jpg. Now if I run that again, we get this array that contains 2 images. Now we can compare, and we can see, yes, it got maintainable JavaScript in preview, but it ignored the first 2 images, and that's because those were PNG files, or PNGs. They weren't JPEGs. So how could we fix this? Well, we could just change it like that, and yeah, that's going to return now the PNG versions, but we want to be able to specify we're going to hunt down anything that ends with, say, JPG or PNG. And to do that, we can pass a second parameter to glob, which we call glob brace. Now I can surround it with curly braces and provide a comma-separated list of the extensions that I'm hunting for. So I will do JPG and also JPEG. Now if I run it, now we're getting all of the files within this folder that end with our desired extension. And that way we can be sure that it's going to ignore anything like a text file or HTML files or SAS files, stuff like that. If I run it again, yep, it's not going to pull that up. If we wanted it to pull up text files, we would have to add that extension, and now it's showing up. Now, one important thing that you have to understand, and this confused me at first, is our instinct is to provide a space after the commas to make it more readable. But within these curly braces, that space has actual meaning. It's referring to a space in the file name. So we want to make sure that there's no spaces between our comma-separated list. Now we're hunting down all files within the img folder. They can have any number of characters, but they have to end with an extension of PNG, JPG, or JPEG. Now, the second thing you need to know is that PHP is not doing any kind of inspection on the file. It's not determining what type of file. It's simply reading the file name and returning the results based upon whether the file name ends with that sequence of letters. But now at this point, because we have our images, and I will rename that like so, we can filter through it. Maybe I can do for each images as img, and I can echo img. That looks good. And you know what, just to make things a little bit simpler, let's also add a return after each one so it's more readable. Now we can see we filter through it and each one represents img/the file name. Now, what if we want to grab just the name of the file? I'm not concerned with the directory name. And this is fairly common. Maybe you're going to be dynamically creating thumbnails, or you need to grab the name of the file for manipulating it in some way. Trust me, you'll do this a lot. Well, we can grab the file name by taking advantage of this function called base name. So if I run base name, and now I run it again, now you're just going to get the file name. Now, this does not only work with files. For example, if I pass it a directory, some directory goes here. Well, now we're giving it a path to a directory like this. But now if I run it, all it's going to do is essentially return the last sequence after a slash. So if I have a file here like test.php, now it's going to find that last slash and return the values here. But let's go ahead and get rid of that example, bring it back to img. What if instead we wanted to get the directory? Well, in that case, I could do dir name, and that's going to be sort of the flip side. It's going to get the parent directory for the file that you pass it. So in our case, we passed it flat file blog engine, so it figured out what its immediate parent was, which is img, and that's what we get displayed on the page. So at this point, what if you want to grab the extension? For example, you need to determine specifically what the extension is. All right, well, there's lots of different ways that we could do this. I'm going to show you a couple, and then I'll show you the best practice route. Well, we could do something like this, substring, and this will return a substring based upon the value you pass it. So I will give you an example. If I set the second parameter, which is where to start, to 4, now I run it, notice that we are chopping off the first 4 characters. If I set that to 0, we get essentially just what img is equal to. If I set it to 1, now we've chopped off the first letter, 2, now the 2 letters, 4, now we've chopped off img slash. Now watch what happens if I set a negative number. Run it one more time, and now we start from the very end and we move back. So let's bring it back to 0. When I set a negative number, it starts at the end and then we go 1, 2, 3, 4. So when I specify -4, it's going to count to 4 starting from the end, and that will be the value that it passes. So for example, if I want to just return PNG, that's 3 characters, so I would specify -3. Run it one more time, and now we have the extension. However, as I noted before, what if I rename this to preview.jpeg? That's the file type. And let's get rid of that, that's ugly. Well, now this isn't as flexible as we want because there's 4 letters in that case. So if we upgraded this to 4, well, now we have the correct JPEG extension, but now we're pulling in that period. So notice how this isn't ideal. We're making assumptions about what the extension will be and how many characters will be available. A better way is to take advantage of path info. So watch what happens now if I run print r, and then I run the path info function, and we provided a file. If I reload it, now we're going to get all these arrays, and each array will be the information about the specific file that we passed it. So in this first instance, we passed it path info, and we passed it this file name, and then it deciphers it and returns this nice array containing all of the information that you would need. Most importantly, as of PHP 5.2, we now have access to the file name itself. So this is really helpful because now we could say info equals path info img, and now I can echo info extension, and that will give me the file extension regardless of how many characters there are. And the same thing, if I need to grab the file name, for example, well now PHP has done the work for me, and I don't have to use these weird slicing techniques to figure out the specific part of the string that I need to match. But still, this could be a little bit cumbersome because path info is going to return an array unless we modify it a bit. So maybe you could do something like this. You could run extract on path info img, and then I could echo extension, reload the page, now we're getting that. We can echo file name, and then a new line just to make it more readable. Yeah, now we're getting that. And the way extract works is you provided an associative array, and in this case, we know that path info returns that very thing. So we're taking that associative array, we're passing it to the extract function, and then extract will filter through that array and make each key into a variable and make the key's value equal to the variable's value, where you can populate this data array, something like this, data equals array, and you fill that array up with everything that your view might need. And then ultimately, when you load your view, you run that through extract, and then you have these nice clean variable names that you can work with. But still, this is a little too much work. We don't need to do that. Instead, path info can accept an optional second parameter. So now if I run pathinfo img, I can do this, pathinfo, and maybe I need to determine what the extension of the file is. Well, I can do that just like this. Now if I echo that out, now we're getting PNG, and one more time let me add a new line to make it more readable. Now that's a lot easier. So what's going on is when I add that second parameter, we are specifying that pathinfo should no longer return an array, instead it should return a specific value. And you have the 4 different options here. So if I want the file name instead, well, I can do pathinfo file name, reload that, and now I have access to that. So let's say somebody has uploaded an image and you want to dynamically create thumbnails. And this is something we'll take a look at in this course. So you will get to a point where you need to create that thumbnail file. So you need to be able to capture what the current file name is, and then maybe you want to append -thumb or something to specify that this is the thumbnail version of the image that was uploaded. Well, this is exactly how we could do it. We could say info equals pathinfo the image, and then I could say thumb name will be equal to info file name. Then I'm going to add a -thumb dot, and then I'm going to concatenate info extension like so. So now if I echo thumb name, what you'll see here is, and once again, let me add a new line. There we go. So now what you see here is we've taken apart the file and we've created this new version where we have appended -thumb to every file. And then that would be the way that you would save your new thumbnail. Or if you want to go back to the extract method, we could just take this right here, extract, like so, and then we can rewrite it doing thumb name equals, and this time we will use interpolation. So I will put it all within double quotes and do file name -thumb dot, and then extension, like so. All right, let's comment this out and I run it, and now we're getting that exact same thing. So maybe if I want to begin the file name with thumb and then dash, now we've taken apart the file, we've given it a new name, and now we can use that as how we would save the thumbnail. Now, if you feel that this kind of interpolation isn't as readable, you can always wrap this within curly braces, like so. And that just makes it a little more understandable. Hey, we're dealing with interpolation here, and we're going to get the exact same thing. So what I will do here is I'm going to add back on the original version, like so, and I will comment that out. That way, if you download the source code, you can take a look at the 2 different ways that you could accomplish this. All right, and we're going to end it right there for today because we took a look at some important functions, and I'd prefer you to take the rest of the day and try to commit these to memory. Figure out how you could use them to accomplish various tasks. So at the top, let's make a note. We looked over base name. We looked over dir name to find out the parent directory for a file. We reviewed pathinfo, which is incredibly helpful when deciphering the content of a file. We reviewed substring to return a subsection of a string. And then we also reviewed the extract function, which again, you will see in MVC frameworks all over the place. Okay, so I will end that comment, and that's going to do it for today. As always, my name is Jeffrey Way, and I'm going to see you in the next lesson of PHP Fundamentals.